Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Multi-Meal Magic, where we turn one main ingredient into multiple meals. Today our main ingredient is chicken breast, and we're going to turn it into chicken curry, teriyaki chicken, and chicken with oyster sauce. First, we're going to start with our boneless and skinless chicken breast and slice them into yay thick slices. This is the perfect thickness for me because it's thin enough to cook through fairly quickly and at the same time thick enough so that it won't break apart easily when stir fry it later. After we slice the chicken, we're going to throw it into a bowl and mix it with some cornstarch and dark soy sauce. I'm using dark soy sauce with mushrooms flavor here, but you can use whatever type of soy sauce you have on hand. You want just enough of both to lightly coat the chicken. Once we mix it, we can cover the bowl and put it in the fridge while we prep the sauces. We're going to start with the simplest sauce, which will be the teriyaki sauce. There are three main ingredients that go into the teriyaki sauce: the soy sauce, mirin, and sake. Here you can see me making at least a double amount of sauce for how much teriyaki chicken I'll eventually make, so adjust accordingly. The proportions between the three liquids is more important, and the basic teriyaki sauce usually goes for a 1:2:2 ratio of sake to mirin and soy sauce. You can also add some thinly sliced ginger or chopped garlic to this base, or sugar if you like your food on the sweeter side. I'm not particularly a fan of sweet food, so I'm going to hold off on adding any sugar today. Give it a light mix, and you're done. For the curry chicken and oyster chicken, we're going to start with water mixed with a scoop of my magic ingredient that I put in many of my dishes, which is I found that it's really a high quality ingredient that is a cheap and easy way to add umami to any dish, whether it has chicken or not. And they do make other versions of it, like vegetable, beef, seafood, and more. And you may well see some of these other versions make an appearance in later videos. If you don't have it, you can use chicken stock instead of this mixture, or use whatever chicken concentrate you have on hand. Or you can just use water if you don't have any of those. Just keep in mind you'll need to add more salt later on to compensate if you only use water. Here I'm going to add a little bit more water to the oyster sauce base because I know I like it a little bit more loose than the curry base. Next, we're going to add curry powder and turmeric powder to the curry base. The turmeric is largely there for color rather than taste, so don't go too heavy on it. I'm also going to add a few taps of white pepper powder to both the curry and oyster sauce bases. Next, we're going to finish the oyster sauce base, starting with, of course, oyster sauce, a little bit of sesame oil, soy sauce, and dark soy sauce. If you don't have dark soy sauce, just add a little bit more of both oyster sauce and regular soy sauce and mix. Lastly, we just need to prep one other main ingredient for the curry, which is the onion, which we're going to cut into wedges. I've also made this dish quite often with no onions at all, so it's not a requirement by any means. It just gives the dish a nice contrast in texture and taste. Now that we prepped everything, it's time to cook, starting with the main ingredient. These directions are assuming that you're not cooking with a non-stick pan, by the way, so if you're using non-stick, use lower heat in the preheating step. Preheat your wok or large pan over medium-high heat until it's just starting to smoke. Then add a good splash of a high smoke temperature oil. I'm using canola oil here. You want enough oil to cover all areas of the pan where chicken will be cooking, so for me that'll be the bottom of the pan and about halfway up the side of the wok on all sides. While you're turning the pan to coat the base in oil, turn the heat down slightly so you don't overheat the oil. After you've coated the pan in oil, turn the heat up to high for about 10 to 15 seconds so it gets back up to temperature, then add the chicken. If the chicken is in a clump, spread it out so that as much of the chicken is touching the cooking area as possible. Then let it cook untouched. After about 2 minutes, toss or turn the chicken in the pan so that the raw parts gets cooked, and we're going to keep doing that until we can't see any pink parts on any piece. Keep in mind that as you do this, especially if you're cooking a large amount of chicken, you can move the pieces that you know are fully cooked to the top to slow down the cooking, and vice versa. As reference, I am cooking 4 large sliced chicken breasts here, and it took me just a little over 7 minutes to get them to how I like them. It's fine if some of the pieces are slightly undercooked at this point, because we're going to cook each portion again in just a moment in all of the sauces. We just don't want to see any obviously undercooked pieces, because we want to get at least a little sear on all of the pieces, which we can achieve when we add sauce. Now I am removing most of the chicken so that I can add the first sauce. If you don't want to cook off the chicken at this point, you can absolutely refrigerate the portion and cook in the sauce later. After I've taken out the portions I want to reserve for the curry and oyster chicken, I'm going to go in with the teriyaki sauce. And right about now is when I realize I made way too much sauce, but I'm already committed. I try to compensate by adding some chicken back in, but it only helped a little. We're going to cook the chicken and sauce together over medium heat until the sauce is reduced by about half, and tasting the chicken for seasoning and doneness near the end, which took about another 5 minutes. If I had to make the correct amount of sauce, I think 3 minutes would have been plenty, but I cooked it for a few extra minutes to reduce the sauce even more, which of course also made it a little bit more salty in this case. After the teriyaki chicken, do as I say and not as I do here. We're going to clean and prep the wok or pan just like when we were going to cook the chicken by bringing it to almost smoking over medium-high heat, adding a little oil to cover the cooking surface with heat turned down, and this time I'm going to turn the heat only back up to medium instead of medium-high, and add the onion wedges. We're going to separate the layers of the onion wedges in the pan with your spatula if some are still stuck together at this point, and we're just going to continue cooking for about another minute. If your pan is smoking like mine here and you did clean the pan, turn the heat down a little. After that minute, add another portion of the chicken back in and toss lightly to start heating the chicken back up. Here you see me still chopping the onion ends with my spatula, still because I totally forgot to cut the root of the onion off earlier. Then we can go in with the curry sauce and finish cooking the chicken and cook the onion to our desired texture. And for me, that's when they're getting soft but still has a tiny crunch, which took about 3 minutes. Same as the teriyaki sauce, we want to taste this for seasoning, and I definitely needed more salt. There are situations where it might be appropriate to add soy sauce when a dish needs salt. This is not one of them, personally, because we don't want the additional liquid nor throw the curry flavor out of balance here, so I'm just going to use regular table salt. And taste again for seasoning. When it's seasoned to your liking, it's done. Lastly, we're going to clean our wok or pan out again and go straight in with the last portion of our chicken into a pan that's been heating over medium heat for just about a minute. We don't want or need the pan to be at a stir-frying temperature this time, nor do we need to add oil because we're just reheating the chicken a little bit. After the chicken's being reheating in the pan for a while, we're going to add broccoli. I'm using frozen broccoli here, but you can use raw florets if that's what you have. If you're using raw broccoli and you like your broccoli on the softer side, you might need to blanch it in boiling water for about a minute before adding it to the chicken. You can cook it from raw just with the chicken as well, but it'll take longer and that could overcook the chicken if you like your broccoli softer. We're just going to toss to combine the broccoli and chicken for a minute, then add in the oyster sauce, mix again to coat everything, and let the flavors melt a little over medium heat while the broccoli cooks. After about another 3 minutes or so, I'm tasting it for seasoning again, and this needs a little bit more salt as well. And that's it. 3 different dishes made with one main ingredient that you only need to prep once, all done in just about 45 minutes from start to finish. The prep time was about 15 minutes with my very dull knife, so you can probably have that or more depending on how fast you are at prepping. If you're still here, I cannot say how much I appreciate you sticking around until now. This is my very first video on YouTube, as well as the first video in this series, which is intended for folks who enjoy variety in their food, but either don't enjoy the prepping process or simply don't have time to prep. So hopefully these dishes offer you a little variety in your life without adding too much effort to your meal planning. If you can drop a like and subscribe to the channel, it'll really keep me going. And if you have any feedback, good or bad, feel free to leave a comment as well, and I'll try to respond and use that to improve as much as possible. Lastly, I'm sure you've noticed that throughout the video that I don't really measure or give estimates on how much seasoning I'm adding, and that's intentional. It's the reason for the name of this channel, as well as the spirit of what I want this channel to be, which is a channel with relatively simple, relatively cheap ingredients, but that encourages and enables beginners to really take that step in cooking, where they're choosing how much or how little of an ingredient they're putting in a dish because of their own tastes, rather because the recipe said so. Because my ideal combination of seasoning is almost never going to match somebody else's. And following recipes blindly can often give somebody a dish that's not to your personal taste, even if they followed all the steps perfectly. Thanks again for joining me on this journey, and I hope you have a wonderful day.